Good morning. To help in the presentation of our way to understand the FUE technique and the improvement that we have done recently in the way we prepare the patient for the procedure, taking in account the new tools that we have been presenting during this workshop regarding donor management and coverage value, we are going to show a two-step strategy for advanced alopecia in a patient we have done not long ago. This patient has 64 years old and began to lose hair at the age of 35. He has alopecia background from his father's side. He has never been on medical treatment, and as personal pathology, he has a respiratory distress due to he is a heavy smoker. In the examination, he has a Norwood 5 pattern with an important hair loss in the frontal and crown areas. As we mentioned, the plan is to repair both areas with 5,500 grafts in two procedures with a 5-month gap. We did his first procedures in April 2016 when we were starting with the new statistic, so I will be brief with this first procedure and get more in details on the second surgery. Here we have the USB microscope peaks, where we can see nice grouping, but the best evaluation is always with the dermalite, the hair counters up and the micrometer. So after doing our measurements, his hair caliber is 52, 55 and 50 microns, and the density is 70, 87 and 93 in temporal, parietal and occipital areas. The hair per follicular unit average is 2.27 and the total donor area is 230 square centimeters. The coverage value was 8.3 for the temporal, 10.2 for parietal, and 11 for occipital. That means a total of 19,000 follicular units in the safe zone. Using the Excel graph counter table, we can estimate that with the reference of a minimum donor coverage value of 5.4, we could extract 17, 29, and 3,700 grafts from temporal, parietal, and occipital areas. So his total donor capacity is 8,400 grafts. That represents the 43% of his safe donor area. Taking in account these numbers, we started the surgery doing the frontal hairline design and placing 2,800 grafts in the frontal area. The graph counter up gave us the distribution of extraction per area, hairs per graft breakdown, and the hairs per graft average, 2.39 in this case. When we introduce those numbers in the Excel table, the most important data to focus on is how we decrease the coverage value in the different donor areas, 8 to 7 in temporal, 10 to 8 in parietal, and 11 to 9 in occipital. That's good enough to face the second surgery with security. When we did the pre-recipient evaluation with 81 square centimeters in frontal area, we would need 3,600 grafts to have that desirable 5.4 coverage value. But we decided to extract only 2,800, so we knew that we were going to have a suboptimal coverage. At this point, we are not considering the native hair to do our calculation. To finish with our pre-recipient general evaluation, we also know now that we will need 7,100 grafts to cover both frontal and crown areas. At the end, we placed those 2,800 grafts in a lower area, 78 square centimeters, with a total hair per graft rate of 2.39. That's higher than expected. The estimated recipient coverage value was 4.5. Now we are seeing the patient at 24 hours and 2 months, and again ready in the operating room at 5 months with a nice and early regrowth of the transplanted area. This second procedure was in September 2016, so we took the time to film all the steps required to prepare the patient for surgery. That is the main objective of this movie, beyond the technical issues. Remember that the goal of the first procedure was to have a coverage value of 4.5 in the frontal area. So, firstly, we start drawing the recipient and unsafe area with long hair. We take some sample of hair to measure again the hair caliber in all different areas and shave the donor. The next step is to measure the targeted area to be repaired with a transparent sheet. Make some movies of the shaved areas and see the naturalness of the previous procedure, and dye his donor area to facilitate the extraction due his white and gray hair. Next, we mark out the temporal and parietal areas with some pre-made templates and the occipital again with the transparent sheet. Right after, we evaluate the donor with the USB microscope and do some photos with the dermalite to know the density and hair per square centimeter on the different donor areas. This time the density was 55, 73 and 83 per square centimeters, and the average hair per graph 2.33. Again, with a total donor area of 230 square centimeters, the coverage value was 7, 8 and 9 in temporal, parietal and occipital, with 16,000 follicular units in the safe donor area. With the 5.4 coverage value reference, now the donor capacity is 5,700 grafts, 35% of his currently donor area, and only must take care on both temporal areas where the limit is close, 971 grafts to be extracted. Our plan is to extract again 2800 grafts, so that means that we will have more or less another 3000 grafts available in the donor after this second procedure. With those data, we started the surgery in the parietal zone. We pre-medicate the patient with 5 mg of diazepam and apply the anesthesia with a 30G needle. We use lidocaine 1% and adrenaline 1 in 200,000. That means 0.5 milliliters in 100 cc. The total amount of lidocaine we use per patient along the day is less than 100 milliliters. In the first procedure, we used a 0.8 mm punch, but because in the crown we want to augment the hair per graft rate, a 85 mm was chosen. We prefer to use the polarized light to facilitate the eyesight and initiate the extraction doing a couple of cuts, evaluating depth and angle. Once our knowledge of these facts grows, the number of grafts per series also augments. We usually score 50 to 100 units before extract them. For the delivery, we use 2 bayonet forceps number 7. During the extraction, we only need one of our nurses. The grafts are counted twice, first by the surgeon with the foot counter, and then by the nurse whilst she separates its grafts according to the number of hairs, and introduce all those data in the hair counter app at the end of the extraction. We usually collect 300 to 600 grafts per hour and store them in a quadri-petri dishes with petri coolers, changing the petri dish every time we change the area, keeping them in the refrigerator at 4 degrees. Our maximum time of hypoxia must be in between 4 to 6 hours. After 5.5 hours, we were ready to place 2800 grafts. The graft counter showed us 2.44 hairs per graft, with only 600 extracted in the temporal area due his low coverage value. In the pre-recipient evaluation, the goal was to cover 75 square centimeters with a 2.27 hair per graft. With that rate, to achieve a 5.4 coverage value, 3,300 grafts were needed. We decreased the coverage value from 7 to 6 in temporal area, from 8 to 6 in parietal, and from 9 to 8 in occipital, assuring an homogeneous extraction and a good donor management. So, our nurse classified the grafts and prepared the table for loading the follicles. We anesthetized the targeted area and start the placement. As you know, we do not use tumescence or pre-made incisions. We don't have any preference to start in a specific order to do the crown or any other area. When the time out of the body is approaching its limit, I prefer to start with the best unit I have, 3s and 4s, With Sporian, there's no different going backward or forward, depending on the comfort of the surgeon and the ease of the insertion. We empty the petri dishes in the same order as the extraction. First, we place all the units of the first dish and then we move on the second dish, respecting the time of hypoxia. The placement of 1000 grafts varies in between 1 hour and 15 to 1.5, as we don't lose time with the pre-made incision. The day is going to be over after 4 hours of implantation. We medicate our patients with corticoids and antacid. We give them saline solution to spray the transplanted area every 1.5 hours. We do not use any bandage, creams or antibiotic. The patient sleeps in a normal position, resting on the opposite side of the implanted area. Optional painkillers completes their medication at night. Let's finish with the final post-recipient statistics. The real grafted area was 63 square centimeters instead of 75. The total hair graft rate was 2.44 instead of 2.27. Reason why the estimated coverage value was 5.4. The better hair per graft rate and a minor real area grafted improved the initial estimation of the recipient coverage value. And as we mentioned before, we know that we have almost 3,000 grafts left in the donor to increase the overall density in a third procedure if it's required. Next, we can see some photographs of the patient in the next morning when the patients came for the first wash in the donor area. We read the post-surgical instruction, give all the medications and teach how to do the washing at home. Finally, I want to show how we do the survival control. At 5 months, this patient had 2400 grafts from 2800 grafted in the first procedure. 5 months later, in his first post-op follow-up, we can check the 10-month outcome in the frontal area and 5 months result in the crown. Comparisons show the improvement we had since the beginning. Let us remember that the estimated coverage value for the frontal area was 4.49 and the real coverage value 5.13. The difference between estimated and real is that the estimated is an average, as if we had grafted the same density in all the recipient area, and the real is the result of the direct measurement of the density in certain recipient areas. Therefore, we can say that the average coverage value is 4.49 with maximums of 5.13. If we add the native hair that the patient had in his frontal area and the advantage of the gray hair that gives a greater optical coverage, we are satisfied with the result. The crown already started a new growing phase and we have an excellent survival at 5 months, but with lack of coverage that we will have at the end of his evolution. Remember that the crown estimated coverage value was 5.4, higher than the front since we have fewer native hair on the area. I know that all these numbers are complicated at the beginning, but if you have real interest in hair transplant, will help you to control and the understanding of your work. Remember one last thing, the coverage value makes no sense if you don't have a good rate of graft survival. And in this way, we ended this video, which I hope have been interesting. Thanks a lot.